Hello, and welcome to your next lesson on pivot tables. Today, we will create a table based on regional sales. We will break out our sales by dates, giving us the ability to compare dates as well as regions. We will also update our labels. We will look at our options for formatting numbers and dates. And finally, we'll cover the display options for our pivot table. Please open the pivot worksheet and go to the Sales tab to follow along in this lesson. Okay, so here we are on our Sales tab, and before we begin, I would like to tell you a little bit about our data. Today, we are working with 100 rows, and our data is based on sales. Our category includes regions, countries, total revenue, total cost, total profit, and the sales date. Today we'll create a pivot table that would allow us to compare the region as well as the sales date. Let's place our mouse inside a cell A1 and let's go ahead and say insert. Now let's go ahead and say table. And as you can see, a cell assumes we would like to include all of our data. Let's leave my table has headers checked and go ahead and say OK. Now as you can see, our data has been placed into a table. Let's go ahead and give our table a name. Let's call it sales. Now let's go ahead and create our pivot table based on our sales table as our data source. Okay, so now let's say insert. Let's go ahead and select pivot table. In the table and range box, you should see sales. If you do not, go ahead and type the word sales. Let's go ahead and say new worksheet and let's say OK. And as you can see, Excel has inserted a new worksheet for us to work with. Before we get started, I would like to go ahead and name our new worksheet. Let's double click on the tab and let's go ahead and call this Sales Pivot. Okay, so now let's begin by selecting our pivot table. And let's go ahead and make sure our field list is visible. Now you can do that by going to the Pivot Table Analyze tab and selecting Field List if your field list is not visible. Okay, so I want to go ahead and start by selecting Region, Total Revenue, Total Cost, and Total Profit. So now this gives you an idea of how you can compare the regions side by side. With this layout, you can easily compare the total revenue, the total cost, as well as the total profit for each region. You can also look at the combined total for each category. So next, what I would like to do is go ahead and update our labels. Let's select sum of total revenue. And as you look up at your formula bar, you will see the title. I'm going to just go ahead and select sum of total, and I'm going to go ahead and back that out. And this will leave the word revenue. Okay, now for the sum of total cost, I'm just going to double click it. As you can see, when I double click, the value field settings opens up. I'm just going to go ahead and leave the word cost in and delete everything else. I'm going to say OK. I'm going to go ahead and repeat this step for profit. I'm going to double click and I'm just going to go ahead and name my category profit, and then I'm going to go ahead and say OK. Let's go ahead and format our numbers. Let's double click the revenue category. Now, as you can see, when I do this, the value field settings open up. Let's select number format. I'm going to go ahead and select the county. I'm going to leave the $ in 2 decimal places, and I'm going to go ahead and say OK. As you can see, when I do this, my number format is applied to the entire category. Okay, so let's go ahead and repeat the steps for cost and profit. Let's double click on cost. Let's click number format. And then let's go ahead and select accounting and say OK. All right, I want to go ahead and double click profit. Let's select number format, select accounting again, then let's go ahead and say OK. Now, another way that you can reach these fields is by selecting the category directly from the value drop down, and then just go ahead and select value field settings from here. Okay, so let's go ahead and plug in our dates. I'm going to select sales date, and I'm going to drag it into my rows. Now, as you can see, when I do this, it automatically added months, giving me another option to add. But what I'm looking for is quarters. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go over to cell A5, which is my first month. I'm going to do a right click. I'm going to say group. And then this gives me other options that I want to apply as opposed to just dates. I'm going to go ahead and select quarters, and I'm going to say OK. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and remove sales date, and I'm going to leave quarters. So now my information is based on quarters as opposed to dates. So this gives me another comparison option. Next, I would like to show you your options for displaying your subtotals as well as your grand total. So we'll go ahead and take a look at how that's done, and then we'll wrap up the lesson. Let's go ahead to the Design tab. Let's go ahead and select the subtotal drop down. Okay, so you have the option to do not display your subtotals. You can show your subtotals at the bottom, or you can show them at the top as they are reflected now. Let's go ahead and select show all subtotals at the bottom of the group so we can see what that looks like. Now let's go ahead and take a look at our grand totals. So this gives you the option on whether or not you would like to display your grand totals. So I'm going to go ahead and say turn them off for rows and columns. And as you can see, your grand total disappears. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my grand total back on. I'm going to place my subtotal back on top. And now I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the lesson. I hope you found this information helpful today, and I will see you in the next video. Congratulations on completing another video and on your commitment to learning this program. I hope that you are getting the most out of our level up lessons, and I will look forward to seeing you on the next video.